Email number one from 2011, and you've just summarized it well. I think is the most damning of the three emails because what you have is Jeffrey Epstein telling Ghislaine Maxwell Trump is in his house.
Hi, I'm Maddie Hell and welcome to the Trump Report. Today I've got Professor Scott Lucas from the Clinton Institute at University College Dublin on the program. And just a reminder that you can watch us every day, Monday through Friday on Times Radio's YouTube page, or you can stream us as a podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Scott, thank you so much for joining the Trump Report today.
How could I miss this one today, Maddie, given what we're going to talk about?
We've got some breaking news for our audience. I'm going to read it out for you. So the Democrats on the House Oversight Committee have released three emails from Jeffrey Epstein's estate, which show that there are emails between Jeffrey Epstein to Ghislaine Maxwell, and then two emails from Jeffrey Epstein to Michael Wolff, who was, of course, a journalist and a Trump biographer. So I'm going to start with the earliest email, and we're going to go email by email for our audience to kind of get the gist of what this is and how much of an impact it will have on the Trump administration. So this email, 2nd of May 2011, it's an email from Jeffrey Epstein to Ghislaine Maxwell. So it starts with Jeffrey Epstein sending this to Ghislaine. I want you to realize that the dog that hasn't barked is Trump. Victim spent hours at my house with him. He has never once been mentioned. Police chief, etc. I'm 75% there. Ghislaine Maxwell responds, I have been thinking about that, ... So Scott, your response to that, and just for our audience to understand, Ghislaine Maxwell was interviewed by Trump's Attorney General in August. The quote that she said was, I've never witnessed the president in any inappropriate setting in any way. The president was never inappropriate with anybody. Again, this doesn't say that he was, these emails, but I want your reaction to this.
Well, thanks, Maddie. First, a bit of context before we break this down. There are 23,000 emails from the Epstein estate. Now, note, these were obtained by the House Oversight Committee, Republicans and Democrats, not by the FBI, which continues to sit on the case files and continues to try to limit what information gets out. Because the House has come back into session today after more than 7 weeks, being held out of session by House Speaker Mike Johnson, now we get these emails drop. Email number one from 2011, and you've just summarized it well, I think is the most damning of the three emails because what you have is Jeffrey Epstein telling Ghislaine Maxwell Trump is in his house. So it's not at Mar-a-Lago, it's not elsewhere, it's in Epstein's house. And he is alongside one of the victims whose names have been withheld because you don't publicize victims' names, certainly not without their permission. And it's hours at Epstein's house. Now, this doesn't mean that Trump knows that anything inappropriate was going on with this girl, but he definitely knows that there were girls in Epstein's house. Again, we have to emphasize when you get these individual emails, they don't have the context around them. We don't have other emails. They might have been part of a chain or whatever. So there's a couple of things that are kind of vague here. It appears that when he refers to the dog that hasn't barked, he's talking about the fact that Trump has not spoken out about the case. Remember that Epstein had been convicted in 2008 in Florida, but that he plea bargained that conviction. So that case was relatively limited in terms of the punishment that he had to serve. But it appears that, Trump, who says he's broken with Epstein years earlier, has not made any comment on it. At the very end, what this reference is to police chief, that I don't know. And I don't know what I'm 75% there means. So it's the kind of thing which is, this is not a good email for Trump, but there's even more that people could dig into.
Yeah, I mean, the 75% there is quite confusing. I don't know if they're like sifting through people that have been a part of the ring and they're kind of gathering a list of names where we don't want to speculate that. But let's move on to the second email. Just for our audience to understand, we are going earliest to latest in terms of dates. The second email is the 16th of December 2015. This is from Michael Wolff to Jeffrey Epstein. Again, Michael Wolff being the journalist. And just for the audience to understand, this is December of 2015, and Donald Trump had announced his first run for presidency in June 2015. So just maybe, 6 or 7 months before that. So Michael Wolff writes to writes to Jeffrey Epstein, I hear CNN is planning to ask Trump tonight about his relationship with you, either on air or in scrum afterwards. Jeffrey Epstein replies, if we were to craft an answer for him, what do you think it should be? Michael Wolff replies, I think you should let him hang himself. If he says he hasn't been on the plane or to the house, then that gives you a valuable PR and political currency. You can hang him in a way that potentially generates a positive benefit for you, or if it really looks like he could win, you could save him generating a debt. Of course, it is possible that when asked, he'll say Jeffrey is a great guy and has gotten a raw deal and is a victim of political correctness, which is to be outlawed in a Trump regime. So your response to that, Scott?
Potentially damaging. Let's work through this in details. First of all, it indicates, by the way, that Michael Wolff, who has spoken out about Trump, photographs of Trump that he was shown by Epstein, those photographs of Trump with girls, this shows how close Wolff is to Epstein, because they're effectively collaborating in terms of the line that they take here. Now, what is that line? If CNN, or not, if this comes out in relation to a presidential debate that I believe was hosted by CNN, it was the fifth presidential primary debate amongst the Republicans. So they're anticipating there may be a question that comes out about Epstein. In the end, there wasn't. But what if there had been? Note that what Wolff is saying here is, in effect, that if Trump says he has not been on Epstein's plane, the so-called Lolita Express, or to Epstein's house, then Trump is lying. Note that phrase, this gives Epstein a valuable PR and political currency, that Epstein could hang him in a way that generates a positive benefit for you. In other words, Epstein calls out Trump for lying, gets the benefit of that, or if Trump becomes president or looks like he can become president, Epstein can hold this information over Trump's head. I know you were on that plane. I know you were on the house. So what are you going to do to keep me silent? In the end, it doesn't come up because the question doesn't come up at the debate. So Trump gets off the hook here.
That is an interesting takeaway. It is very much like what can I get out of Donald Trump winning the presidency, which of course he went on to win in November 2016, 11 months later. The third email, Scott, the 31st of January 2019. This was from Jeffrey Epstein to Michael Wolff. Keep in mind that Jeffrey Epstein did die around 7 months later in August of that year, 2019. So this is from Jeffrey Epstein to Michael Wolff, and of course is a bit redacted, so it might not make sense to anyone, but it says, victim, Mar-a-Lago, blank. Trump said he asked me to resign, never a member ever. Now, just for context, I'm going to assume that means resign from Mar-a-Lago, like resign your membership. I don't know if you thought that, but just to finish the email, then it says, of course he knew about the girls as he asked Ghislaine to stop.
Right. Okay. So Trump's line has been that he and Epstein had a falling out, which they did have a falling out. Now, other folks have said it was over a property deal where they were trying to outbid each other. Trump's line is, "Oh, I found out. I didn't like what Jeffrey was doing, so I kicked him out of Mar-a-Lago." So Epstein's knocking that back and said, "Look, I wasn't a member of Mar-a-Lago." The key phrase here, in connection with the fact that one of the girls is named, is, of course, Trump knew about the girls as he asked Elaine to stop. Now, does that mean that Trump knew about Epstein's activities with the girls, or does it simply mean that Trump knew that Epstein was getting some of the girls from Mar-a-Lago? So Trump's defenders are going to say this actually gets Trump off the hook here because Trump actually asked Ghislaine Maxwell to stop basically trafficking women by getting them from Mar-a-Lago. Those who are more skeptical will say, again, Trump knew more about the activities beyond Maxwell, just trying to get the girls from Mar-a-Lago. It's inconclusive just on the basis of this single email.
Because we know that Trump said a few months ago on Air Force One that part of the reason was the falling out was because he said that Epstein was stealing workers from Mar-a-Lago, and then Virginia Giuffre says that she was trafficked when she was working at Mar-a-Lago, where her and her father also worked. So that is the context surrounding that. So those are the three emails. Would you consider them bombshell emails that kind of do not do well for the Trump administration?
Two of the three, definitely. And I'm going to say that in terms of the specifics as we go through them, that 2011 email is significant because it just completely shreds Trump's denial that he spent any time in Epstein's house and where the girls, in which any of the girls were present. Now, you remember, Maddie, that we know that we had witness testimony from two of the girls. Virginia Giuffre was one of them, and then there was a second who had said, "Look, we were there when Trump was there." So this was already in question what Trump said. Now you've got Epstein himself putting it on record to Ghislaine Maxwell. And again, back in 2011, not to try to get himself off the hook years later, right? He's saying it then. The second is that 2015 exchange, because, and it'll be interesting to see if Michael Wolff is asked about this. People are reaching out to Wolff amongst the press to get a statement. Now, will Wolff confirm this? This appears that he and Epstein effectively know that Trump has been in the house. They know that he's been on the plane. They're going to use that information as leverage against Trump. And again, it doesn't make Epstein look like a saint by any means, or Michael Wolff look like a saint by any means, but it does mean that Trump's idea that he was distanced from Epstein takes that apart. 2019 email, I think, because it's inconclusive, is not as damaging at this point.
Mm. Well, let's move on to the fact that this news, you mentioned this at the start of the interview, Scott, but of course, Congress will resume today after, oh God, what is it? Over 40 days in recess. We'll get into the longest running shutdown in a minute. To start off with, one of the big things that will happen today is Arizona Congresswoman Adelita Grijalva will be sworn in 7 weeks after she won her seat. So she told CNN, "I'm not exactly sure what I'm going to say. I'm going to be as respectful as possible when I say it's undemocratic, it's unconstitutional, it's illegal, should never happen. This kind of obstruction cannot happen again, regardless of party." The context is that House Speaker Mike Johnson had the House on recess. She had basically been saying, "Why am I not being sworn in? This is incredibly bizarre. This is an unprecedented turn of events. I need to be able to do my job. I was elected by the people of this congressional district of Arizona." Democrats and some Republicans argue the reason why there was a delay from Mike Johnson was to avoid releasing the Epstein files, as Grijalva was the 218th signature needed to force this discharge petition. So what's your interpretation of this, Scott? Could House Speaker Mike Johnson no longer avoid the inevitable?
Well, this is why the release of the emails today is doubly damaging, because it intersects with this story about the House Speaker Mike Johnson having stonewalled against giving the oath of office to Adelita Grijalva. Johnson kept the House out of session for more than 7 weeks because it was in recess, when the government shutdown had been for several days. You had the shutdown in there. And it's like, since we're talking about, since what, 2 months ago, that's mid-September, right? That the House has been effectively suspended. And because the House is suspended, they cannot take up this discharge motion, as it's called, which would force a vote on release of the Epstein files. There are, I think, 4 Republicans that we know that have said that they would vote for the discharge measure. If you add that to the Democrats that come in, if Grijalva was seated, it's 218. That's a straightforward majority. So it looks hinky. It looks hinky that Johnson kept her out, because even though the government was shut down, that doesn't prevent him from convening the House in session, let alone giving her the oath of office. Now he cannot hold out any longer because, of course, the House has to come back into session to have a vote on whether or not it ends the shutdown. You cannot continue to prevent a legally elected representative from doing her job in all aspects, not just simply over Epstein or the shutdown. So now this comes up. So, we probably get a vote to end the shutdown tonight. Then, within a day, within 2 days, we get this discharge petition being presented to Johnson with the 218 signatures, and that's it. He's got to hold the vote. There's no way out of it at that point.
So Thomas Massey, who's of course a Republican, who's been leading this discharge petition, he tweeted the media announcement about Adelita Grijalva's swearing-in ceremony, which will take place, I think, 4 p.m. Eastern time today. And he wrote that the 218th and final signature for the Epstein discharge petition will happen tomorrow, so being Thursday. So is it time, or even today he might have meant, but Scott, is it time's up for Trump and the Epstein files?
No, it's an ongoing story, Maddie, because the fact here is that even though the House says we want to have a vote on the Epstein files, it doesn't mean you necessarily get a majority who say we want the release of the files. That's the first hurdle. But then it has to go to the Senate, right? And of course, the Republicans have a 53-47 majority there. How many of the Republicans would defy Trump to force the release on this? And then, if I'm right, depending on since it's actually legislation, I think Trump actually can veto. I'll need to double check that, right? And of course, you have to have 2/3 vote to override it. So I don't think it means that he faces the music of all the files coming out, at least not through this process. But it does put it puts Epstein back at the top of the news cycle. Had this not occurred today, you and I would have been talking government shutdown. Right? We might have been even talking about problems for the Democrats out of the shutdown. Now, Epstein sweeps all of that away, and Trump is back on the defensive. But go beyond this, Maddie, in terms of what we have to watch. We've got that question of the discharge motion, but go back to the fact that the reason why we're talking about this story today is a different strand. And that is, it's the House committee proceeding anyway, without needing a vote, to subpoena information, to subpoena documents, in this case from the Epstein estate. Now they can keep doing that. What's not being released by the Justice Department is the case files. But you can subpoena documents that are related to that. That process is going to continue. So I think we're back to where we were in August when you and I were chatting, and Trump was having to fight news cycle on this. And now he has to fight news cycle, and it's worse this time. It's worse this time because of those emails. Just simply those 2 emails raise the stakes.
What do you think of the Republicans' argument that the recess had nothing to do with the potential discharge of the Epstein files, and that members of Congress were busy, they were working in their own districts, and that it's normal for House members to not be in Washington when there's a shutdown?
It's not normal to not give the oath of office to an elected representative. It's actually not normal to keep the House out of session even if there's a shutdown. I can go into historical precedent for that. But there is no reason why Adelita Grijalva should have been blocked from taking up her duties. Now give me another potential explanation for why she wasn't given that oath of office. And Mike Johnson hasn't come up with one. In fact, he's actually fibbed. He's actually said, oh, she can continue to represent constituents. She can carry out business that relates to constituent interests, which is absolute horse hockey because, no, she's legally barred from representing her constituents until she becomes a representative. So, no, that excuse doesn't hold water. And Johnson, if Trump's on the defensive right now, Johnson's also on the defensive. And remember, he's going to be on the defensive, not just generally. He'll be on the defensive before some of those Republicans who wanted this dealt with. There is a story, Maddie, which came out last week that kind of came and went, that wasn't picked up. It's through a journalist named David Schuster. Now, I'm going to preface this by saying we need confirmation on this. But Schuster is arguing generally that GOP legislators are saying that there is far more in the Justice files that is damaging to Trump than what Michael Wolff has alleged. Now, you may remember, Wolff has said photographs of Trump with girls. Schuster's saying, all right, well, there's representatives, legislators who are telling me there's something worse. That means some legislators are talking to him and telling him that. Now, I'm cautious about the story because Schuster also says that more than 100 Republicans in the House want the release of the files. I don't think we've seen that come out yet. But I think it means that there's probably not just that handful of Republicans who are going to force the discharge motion, but there are more who are not happy about this. Even if they continue to defend Trump publicly, privately, they're saying this is a very, very difficult situation.
Let's move on to something else difficult for the Republican Party, which is, of course, Marjorie Taylor Greene, one of the more conservative members of the GOP, and, of course, one of the staunch Trump supporters. But she and Trump have had a tumultuous few days to weeks. She's criticized the government for their lack of the America First policy, especially when it comes to foreign aid. She debunked Trump's claims that groceries are cheaper under the Trump administration compared to last year when it comes to Thanksgiving prices. She also voted alongside Democrats, of course, in releasing these Epstein files, as you mentioned. So this is all emphasized in her Axios interview. And I want to read out a few quotes for you and our viewers. So she said, "I don't know if the Republican Party is leaving me, or I'm kind of not relating to the Republican Party as much anymore. I don't know which one it is." She also said, "I think the Republican Party has turned its back on America First and the workers and just irregular Americans. But I'll tell you one thing, the course that it's not on, I don't want anything to do with it, and I just don't care anymore." Trump's response, "I don't know what's happened to Marjorie. She's a nice woman, but I don't know what happened. She's lost her way, I think," saying she's catering to the other side. So your response, Scott, to this pretty epic fallout?
Yeah, well, the first thing to say is that neither Donald Trump nor Marjorie Taylor Greene are Republicans. And that makes it interesting. I mean, look, Trump hijacked the Republican Party. Marjorie Taylor Greene is, let's be honest with you, she's a conspiracy theorist. She was associated with QAnon, at least a sympathizer with it. And she comes into office as part of this kind of unusual wing of people who call themselves Republicans, but they're really pushing a very, very unconventional narrative. And I set that up as context because I think one of the issues that triggered Marjorie Taylor Greene versus Trump, of all things, is Israel and Gaza. Marjorie Taylor Greene, some of her conspiracy theories are about Jews. And I don't know if you remember the space lasers one, that Jews invented space lasers, right, to cause havoc. She is not sympathetic to the Israeli position on Gaza, and therefore she's not sympathetic to the Trump administration position. She also has been part of, or intersects with, a few other people we talked about, like Thomas Massie, who's not completely happy with the way that the Trump folks have railroaded legislation through Congress, such as the big not so beautiful bill. And she's one of a kind in a way. I mean, the thing about when you get these types who are not, as it were, conventional Republicans, you cannot necessarily control unconventional characters. And that's what happened with her. I think the reason why I'm sort of limiting the story, however, is it's still the case that when you're talking about Congress, you got to find others who will ally with your position. So right now, who is she allied with? Is she just simply a loose cannon, right, firing at Trump? Or is she linking up with others? Let's say a Thomas Massie. Let's say the others who are really concerned about the Epstein files. And that's what causes a significant problem for Trump, is if she is part of a group of Republicans who take aim at him.
Scott Lucas, thank you for joining the Trump Report today.
Thank you very much, Maddie. It's been a thrill.